Okay, continuing GMOs, the toxic truth. Like there's a chemical in your food right now, not in trace amounts from drift or runoff, but it's actually inside the food, absorbed into the plant by design. Crop was engineered specifically to tolerate it, to drink it in, to be saturated with it, and to survive. And then that crop goes into 80% of processed foods on the U.S. grocery store shelves, and that chemical is called um, glyphosate, and you might know it as Roundup. And the reason you're eating it, it's not by accident. Dr. Ingram, he spent years investigating this. What does published science say about the chemical, what the chemical does to the human body? Now, I'm Dr. Ingram's son, so I'm covering all of his research. He wrote 40 books on wellness, and I'm going to be covering, with God's permission, all of that content, or as much of it as I can. Okay, so we're talking about his book, GMOs, Toxic Truth. This is the second video on that. Okay, so let's talk about the mechanism again, because it's really key to understanding everything else. So GMO crops, they're engineered for one purpose, and that's to survive being sprayed with herbicides that would kill any ordinary plant. So the most common version of this is what the industry calls Roundup Ready. So those are crops whose genetic material has been altered specifically so that the herbicide glyphosate will not destroy them. So those are referred to as Roundup Ready. Roundup Ready soybeans or Roundup Ready canola, Roundup Ready sugar beets. The farmer sprays the entire field and every weed dies, but the crop itself survives. And here's the part that matters. Because the plant is engineered to tolerate this chemical, it absorbs it, and the glyphosate goes into the plant tissue, and into the grain, into the seed, and into the oil. You can't wash it off. You can't cook it out. It's actually inside the food. So Dr. Ingram, his research cited the Washington State University Center for Sustaining Agriculture and Natural Resources, which documented that since the introduction of the GMO crops in the U.S., total pesticide and herbicide use has increased by approximately 300 million pounds. All right, so the promise made to farmers and to the public when these crops were introduced was that GMOs would reduce chemical use. That claim was not just wrong, it was the opposite actually happened. Now the glyphosate is now so pervasive in the environment that it's been detected in rain, in rivers, in groundwater, breast milk, and urine of people who have never worked on a farm in their life, because it doesn't just stay in the field, it migrates and it accumulates. So Dr. Ingram, the question that he asked, and any honest scientist has to ask, is what does it do when it's inside of you? Okay, so glyphosate has been directly linked in published scientific literature to a wide variety of serious conditions, cancer, neurological disorders, birth defects, and others. My father documented that in regions of South America and the US where glyphosate contamination is highest, birth defects are elevated. Glyphosate is, in the published literature, a particularly well-established factor of lymphoma. And a study published in the Journal of Chemical Research and Toxicology tested Roundup on human cells directly. What the researchers found was this: not only is the herbicide itself toxic to human cells, but its so-called inert ingredients, specifically a surfactant known as POEA, significantly amplify that toxicity. The surfactant acts essentially as its delivery mechanism, driving the herbicide deeper into the human tissue that would penetrate on its own. In other words, the label inert, essentially, the research indicates that it makes the poison work harder, essentially. So now here is something that many people have not heard of. So a researcher named M. Antoine, I hope I got that correct, publishing in Scientific Reports, analyzed a specific strain of Monsanto corn. What he found inside it were cadaverine and putrescine, compounds classified as polyamines.
And these are the same chemical compounds that cause the smell of rotting flesh, the smell of cadaver. They were present at almost approximately 25 times higher than expected. So these compounds dramatically raise the risk of allergic reactions by enhancing histamine. They also significantly increase the formation of nitrosamines, and among the most potent carcinogens that exist. So Dr. Ingram, he wrote plainly about what this means. There is an actual biological breakdown happening inside the corn before it ever leaves the field, and it also indicates, he noted, that there is actual animal matter and from foreign genes introduced into the modification, effectively wedged within the corn itself. And this is in the food supply, sold in every grocery store, and classified as generally regarded as safe. And then now the Seralini study, okay, which was the research they tried to bury. Now we'll talk about this study because it's a really important piece of research, one of the most important pieces of researches on this research ever conducted on this subject. And so there was a French researcher, I hope I get the name right, Professor Gilles Eric Seralini, conducted a landmark study published in peer-reviewed journal Food and Chemical Toxicology. Okay, so it was unique in one critical way. So the rats in the study were fed Monsanto GMO corn throughout their entire lifetime, and every prior study had used a 90-day window. This was the first lifetime study ever done. So Seralini found the rats fed the GMO corn, and separately, those given Roundup at levels typically found in tap water, they died significantly earlier than the control group. So the rats that were fed the GMO corn alone died 100% sooner than controls. The combination of the GMO corn and Roundup was even worse. Up to 80% of the female rats developed large tumors, as many as 3 per animal. The researcher described them as colossal. They were so large that they could be seen physically bulging beneath the skin. The lead molecular biologist who commented on the study, Dr. Michael Antoineau of King's College, London, said he was, in his words, shocked by an extraordinary number of tumors developing earlier and more aggressively, particularly in the female animals. The female rats developed primary breast and pituitary tumors. The males developed liver and kidney damage and skin cancers. And the study also found that the Bt toxin in the corn, the same insecticidal protein engineered into the plant to kill crop pests by rupturing their intestines, produced profound changes in the structure and function of the rat's small intestines. Dr. Ingram noted the logical implication of that is for the humans that are consuming this corn daily, year after year, are at risk. Now here is where this becomes a story about something beyond science. So the cancers in Seralini's study didn't begin appearing until the 4-month mark. Every piece of safety data that Monsanto had ever submitted to the regulators was from 90-day studies, just below the threshold where the cancers appear. So Dr. Ingram's research documented this directly. So Monsanto's own internal studies had identified the tumors developed after developed after 90-day windows. So that's why all of the published data only used 90-day trials. So they didn't want to go beyond the 90 days. The company knew it, and it designed its studies to stop just before the evidence emerged. So the FDA documented their conduct in the U.S. congressional record, stating that Monsanto lied. They didn't submit their real observations. They filtered what they presented to the FDA, and during animal studies, when animals developed tumors, they would remove the tumors from the animals during the study period. Can you believe it? That's the congressional report record, August 2nd, 1985. So now, this is where Dr. Ingram's research gets into the territory that people need to understand. because the question has to be asked, how is any of this legal, or how is the substance with this documented profile in the food supply at all? The answer is that it's not accidental. It's actually deliberate, documented regulatory capture. So under U.S. law, any substance added to food that is not classified as genuinely regarded as safe, GRAS, must undergo substantial peer-reviewed testing before it can be sold. So GMOs, they had no such peer-reviewed safety record. And under the law as written, they could not have been approved. To solve this problem, so Monsanto placed one of its own attorneys, Michael Taylor, into the FDA as a deputy commissioner of policy. Taylor then wrote the regulations himself. He classified the GMO foods as substantially the same as their natural counterparts. The classification exempted them from safety testing entirely. And then the White House under George Bush, George H.W. Bush, endorsed and pushed for further deregulation. Okay, so FDA, not surprising to me. FDA scientists objected. Their concerns were formally placed into the record, and then they were deleted. Taylor subsequently left the FDA, returned to Monsanto, and was later reappointed to the FDA at the U.S. Food Safety Czar, where his job was again to maintain the framework he had created for his former employer. So Dr. Ingram documented that when Monsanto's own internal studies were eventually made public, 3 separate strains of its GMO corn were found to cause liver and kidney toxicity in the test animals. The organ systems most responsible for processing and eliminating toxins were themselves being destroyed. This information was never part of the regulatory approval process because the man writing the regulations was the company's own attorney. So it's not a theory, it's documented. The congressional record exists, the regulatory history exists, the personnel records exist, and Dr. Ingram cited all of that. And there's one more piece of the story that I want to put on the record because it speaks to how the industry protects itself when inconvenient science emerges. And in the ongoing legal battles over Agent Orange, which is the Monsanto manufactured herbicide used during the Vietnam War, which veterans claimed caused widespread cancers, a cancer specialist named Sir Richard Dahl was one of the leading expert witnesses arguing that the herbicide was not a significant carcinogen. His testimony was used in full-page newspaper advertisements worldwide to discredit the veteran's claims. After his death, documents found in his own desk revealed that Sir Richard Dahl had been on Monsanto's payroll for over 20 years, and at the time of his public testimony, he was earning approximately $1,500 a week from the company. After his testimony, his payments increased significantly. Now, he simultaneously held paid positions with Dow Chemical and ICI, 2 other manufacturers of substances he publicly declared safe. This is the model. Find a credentialed voice, put them on retainer, deploy them when inconvenient findings need to be neutralized. And my father wrote about whenever a government official or credentials expert speaks publicly to dismiss the concerns about chemical safety, the first question worth asking is, who is paying them? It's not cynicism, it's a documented pattern. So I just want to be clear about something before we close. None of what I've described today is hopeless. So the research exists, the documentation exists, and the history of what happened when people become informed is consistent. They reject these products. Roundup Ready has a weakness model, and the weakness is consumer awareness. The companies that sell these products spent hundreds of millions of dollars to prevent labeling because they know what will happen. People will understand what they're consuming. So here's the practical part. So first, glyphosate in your diet comes from 6 sources. Okay, so we have first, commercial grain products made from non-organic wheat, corn, oats, barley, oat-based products in particular have shown high glyphosate residue in independent testing in recent years because glyphosate is also used as a pre-harvest desiccant sprayed directly on the grain just before harvest to dry it uniformly. Okay, second, commercial corn products of any kind, corn syrup, cornstarch, corn oil, cornmeal, popcorn, cereals. Over 90% of U.S. corn is genetically modified and Roundup ready. Third, commercial soy products, soy oil, soy lecithin, textured vegetable protein, and dozens of soy derivatives hidden in the processed food supply. Fourth, commercial canola oil. It is in nearly every processed, packaged, and restaurant prepared food that contains added fat. Fifth, commercial beet sugar. If the label says sugar without specifying cane sugar, it's almost certainly from Roundup Ready sugar beets. Sixth, conventional animal products from animals fed GMO grain. The herbicide accumulates in the grain they eat. It transfers into the meat, the eggs, and the dairy. Now, the practical response by USDA organic for any grain product, the organic certification legally prohibits the use of synthetic herbicides and glyphosate. Non-GMO project certification addresses the genetic modification but does not guarantee glyphosate-free, and some non-GMO crops are still sprayed with it conventionally. And so switching to your cooking oil, cold-pressed olive oil or genuine avocado oil from a verified source and properly sourced coconut oil are alternatives to canola. And just read the label. If it says vegetable oil, it's almost certainly canola. For meat and dairy, grass-fed, pasture-raised, or organic are the certifications that indicate that the animal was not raised on GMO grain-fed. None of this requires perfection, so complete avoidance is almost impossible. Glyphosate is in the water supply, in the air, in the soil of agricultural regions. The goal is meaningful reduction by removing the most concentrated source in your daily intake. The goal is knowledge, because you cannot make a choice about something that we don't know exists. And then finally, what Dr. Ingram documented and we covered today, glyphosate is absorbed into the GMO crops by design. It's in the food, not merely on the surface of it. Published research in chemical research and toxicology found Roundup Ready, so-called inert surfactant, significantly amplifies the herbicide's toxicity into human cells. The Seralini study, the only study ever to feed GMO corn to rats for their entire lifespan, found that the animals died 100% sooner, and then controls and developed massive tumors at nearly 3 times the rate. Monsanto's own data showed that tumors developed after the 90-day window of their studies. That is why they published safety data for the 90-day windows only. And the FDA investigator documented in the congressional record of Monsanto filtered and falsified the observations they submitted to the FDA and removed tumors from animals during the study period. And Monsanto would later place their own attorney within the FDA who wrote regulations that exempted GMOs from safety testing. Expert witnesses who publicly defended Monsanto's products were, in at least one documented case, on the company's payroll for over 20 years. So none of this is hidden. It's published literature. It's in the government records. My father documented the sources. Documentation exists. And so we're going to talk about next the milk supply and the substances that the substance the company injected into the American dairy cattle over the objections of every other Western government on earth, and what the FDA did when dairies tried to put the warning on the label. So this is, if this video is useful, share it. The people in your life consuming these products every day deserve to have this information, and look forward to continuing coverage on GMO, The Toxic Truth, written by my father, Dr. Cass Ingram, and in the next